Hello, and welcome to a session called Practices for Social Emotional Health of Teachers. We know that teaching is one of the most rewarding and most stressful careers anyone could choose. We also know that there are lots of stresses that are beyond our own control, but we bear a lot of those burdens on our own shoulders. And so it's really very important for us to remember that we have to take time and make an intentional effort to work through all of those stressors and begin to put in place practices that help us with the social emotional health of our communities, of our classrooms, of our homes, and more importantly, of our inner self. It is important and it is okay to take time and to ask for help when we need that help, especially when it deals with a stressful job like teaching. So let's dive in and take a look at some of the best practices that have been identified for social emotional health. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Christopher Berwick, instructional coach at Shawnee Mission East. And for a few years now, I've made the social emotional health of the people I work with and my family and our communities an important priority. A lot of the work that I do in the summer takes me to all kinds of different places around the world, in Costa Rica and the mountains of northern New Mexico, out on tall ships in the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean. And one of the things that we do within these programs is focus particularly with our leadership organization on social emotional health and the importance of bringing social emotional health into our own lives, but also bringing practices for social emotional well-being into our schools. So much of this work today is based on the practices that we've used and the practices that we've identified through the research that's out there that are the most important and most helpful. So let's begin and get a chance to maybe even practice a small bit of this mindfulness process in this work. This does begin with my work as an instructional coach from a book written by Elena Aguiar, who wrote a book called Onward, Cultivating Emotional Resilience in Educators. And right in the very beginning of the book, she says something that's very important for our understanding. She says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And I love that idea of space between stimulus and response. Too often, in my own house, in my own classroom, and even in my own job, the space between the stimulus and response is very short. And that's where we begin to bear the burden of stress. And so what Elena Aguiar says is if we can put space between that stimulus and response, even if it's just take a deep breath, that is where our growth and our freedom lies. If we slow down and examine those moments, if we cultivate new responses, then we just might transform our schools into places where we all thrive. So she outlines 12 of these practices and ideas in her book, one for each month of the year. And we're going to look at a few of those here. The first one she starts out with is know yourself. And the emotion and the peace that goes along with this is purposefulness. So if we make an intentional effort to know ourselves, we begin to rediscover perhaps our purpose and our strengths as it applies to our jobs, our communities, and even our families. She says in the book that self-knowledge helps us to be more confident about our actions and clear on our decisions. It's what enables us to show up in the way that we want to show up. So I put together a couple of resources. We've probably taken all kinds of different personality tests, the Myers-Briggs or, workplace personality tests. But one of my favorites, and one that a colleague uses often in one of her own ministry classes at a private school here in the area is the Enneagram personality test. And it's a simple test, and it's not going to, be earth-shattering or life-changing, but it does give you a chance to take a look at where your strengths lie, and sometimes even within those strengths, what are the weaknesses that we need to be aware of. And so if you click on the truity.com link in the resources, you'll be able to take this simple test. Takes less than 10 minutes. And then how does the Enneagram system work can be found in the link below that. It gives you an interesting and a neat window into your strengths and possibly where your areas of growth lie within that framework. Another one that's really something simple is from Pablo Neruda, a poet. And I want you to think about this idea that he says, "Something ignited in my soul, and I went my own way, deciphering that burning fire." Think of these questions in the course of your life. What has ignited your soul? If you've pursued what felt like a calling in your life, like a burning fire inside, where did it take you? What did you decipher within that burning fire? And how might you connect with what ignites your soul? Take time to journal about that, to share those responses in your journal or with a close friend and have a conversation about deciphering that burning fire. And take moments to think about where that burning fire might be tended. Maybe we have to find some more wood to feed that burning fire. Maybe we have to protect that burning fire to be able to be our most effective selves. When we do that, those routines and those intentional efforts help us know ourselves. The second thing that Elena Aguiar points out in her book is we need to understand our emotions. And along with that comes acceptance. Accepting that emotions are part of who we are. Accepting that emotions are part of being human. And we can realize them, sit with them, process them. They can be happy, they can be sad, they can be mad, they can be glad. Whatever it is important to accept that emotions are a real part of who we are as human beings. So, to understand emotions, Elena Aguiar points out, emotions motivate us to act, get us organized, prioritize, and solve problems. Emotions also help us tune into what others are feeling, and they help us build and maintain social bonds. Emotions help us identify and respond to opportunities. And the resource that I put in here is a mindfulness practice. It's a body scan meditation. And some of the things that we need to do more of is take this time to realize where in our body our emotion sits. We often carry it with tension somewhere in our body. For me, it might be my shoulders, or it might be in my feet. But we carry tension and we carry that somewhere within our body. And by doing a simple body scan that we've put together here, it allows us to tune into those emotions and where they reside within us, and to recognize them, and to work to begin to release those emotions, or at least work to begin to understand and name those emotions. And so you can find this resource by clicking the image. And you can also go to mindful.org and talk and listen to how they talk about why it's important to be emotionally self-aware and what the power of emotional intelligence does to help us as people. This is one of my favorites. Number 3 is tell empowering stories. Because when we tell empowering stories, or when we listen to empowering stories, rooted in all of that is this idea of optimism. And from that telling of powerful stories and empowering stories, it opens up that flower of optimism. Even in a dark, desolate time, Sometimes just listening to those others tell empowering stories helps us and builds us up. And not to mention, if we tell empowering stories, how that even helps us that much more. Elena Aguiar says storytellers have always held key positions in society. The stories we craft predict our futures, encapsulate our legacies, and impact our resilience. You have a choice, so tell powerful stories. And one of the absolute most powerful storytellers I've ever encountered is Rita Pearson. And Rita Pearson is an educator who shares that every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. So please, if you need to be uplifted, if you need to open that emotional response and listen to an empowering story, click below and find out how Rita Pearson reminds us that every kid deserves a champion, and we could be that champion for that kid. The fourth part is to build community. When we build community, we model empathy, and we build capacity for empathy within our community. Elena Aguiar says that here are the main reasons why we need to focus on community. Teachers don't leave strong communities, and children thrive in strong communities. And there are simple things we can do. She posts on her website 66 ways to build community, many, many different ways to build community within our own school. And if we put these pieces into practice, the simple change in our practice, we can build and model empathy within. So please click on the link and find ways that you can start today to build community within your school, among your teachers, in your district, among your staff. Because when we take that first step, we build the capacity for empathy in others, and we model that empathy for everybody in our community. And the fifth one is be here now. If we can sit in mindfulness in the present moment, we are allowing ourselves to recognize our emotions, recognize our challenges, celebrate our successes, and then also be open to the humor that is around us. And not the humor that laughs at other people, but just the humor of the moment. Because sitting in the present moment and recognizing the power that we live within in that present moment opens up the doors to so many things. She says, learning to be in the present moment without judging it boosts our resilience. It can allow us to feel accepting and clear-headed about our options for response. And remember, it allows us to put space between stimulus and response. So when we look at mindfulness practices, there is a difference between having our mind full and being mindful. And there are lots of resources out there for us to use. One of my absolute favorites is Stop, Breathe, Think. And it's an app you can get on your phone, on your iPad, use on the website. And you can actually get a lifetime free premium membership as an educator to this amazing resource. So please click Stop, Breathe, Think in the resources and find out how you can get those resources for use as your own personal practice or use in your classroom. And there's also another link here, best practices for mindfulness, bringing mindfulness into schools. So please consider using that. But I want to take a look at 7 ways that mindfulness can help. And this is from the book Mindfulness for Teachers. And the author outlines these 7 things. It helps teachers understand our own emotions better. It helps communicate more effectively with students. It helps us manage students that we may find difficult. It helps us set up a positive learning environment, and it helps strengthen our relationship with students. It helps us slow down when we need to, and it helps us build community. Mindfulness is not a religious practice. Mindfulness is rooted simply in breathing and being in the present moment. It's something we all can do. And it has its roots in long-standing stories and traditions all across humanity. So let's take just a few minutes right here, right now, to practice a simple breathing exercise in mindfulness. I hope you had a chance, just in that simple 2 minutes and that breathe bubble, to take an opportunity to feel that sense of mindfulness and to stretch out that space between stimulus and response. Because when we do that, we are putting into place those best practices for social emotional health of teachers. We can build resilience in service of our own health and the health of our communities.